Warning! Kinda Murdery contains adult themes, explicit language, and descriptions of violence. It is not suitable for anyone, and we recommend you stop listening now.
True crime with a dash of the paranormal, the garish, the strange, and the darkly comic. I'm Zevon Odelberg, host of Kinda Murdery, a podcast that's about more than just murder. It's my very own pocket dimension, home to a curated collection of bizarre and compelling stories. The unsolved, the unsettling, and the unbelievable. I cover it all, just so long as it's kinda murdery. That's right, my friends, just like it says in the intro, I am Zevon Odelberg, and this is Kinda Murdery. I'm sorry I didn't manage to spend time with you this last Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday, but I am a 49er fan, and I had to devote myself to fandom, sadly, since we lost. But I am back now, the day after Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day, of course, is a holiday when we celebrate Cupid, or more specifically, the love he dispenses with the sharp point of an arrowhead. And I think we all know that love sometimes turns to obsession. So today I've brought you a story of obsession, though granted, a much darker obsession than that of Romeo and Juliet, although oddly less deadly, while more dead. If you're ready, please join me as we uncover what truths we can and solve what mysteries we may. Kinda Murdery's Anatoly Moskvin, the Russian Dollmaker, starts now. In the shadowed corners of the early 1970s, a tale begins to unfold. It's a story that would linger in the memories of the small Russian town of Gorky for decades to come. Our story centers around a young boy named Anatoly Moskvin, a curious soul wandering the streets with the kind of restless energy that only the innocence of youth can harbor. It was during one of these aimless wanderings that the unexpected sight of a funeral procession haunted young Anatoly in his tracks. The air was heavy, filled with a sorrow that tugged at the heartstrings of onlookers. The procession was not just any ritual. It was a somber parade of grief, carrying the remains of a little girl whose life had been tragically cut short. This girl, unknown to Anatoly, was about to become a specter that would haunt the fringes of his existence, unknowingly setting a course for his life that defied the norms of society and the laws of the living. As the mourners passed by, their faces etched with loss and despair, Anatoly found himself inexplicably drawn to the spectacle. Something within him stirred, a morbid fascination that went beyond the mere curiosity of a child. This moment, fleeting yet indelible, marked the beginning of a story so bizarre, so enveloped in the macabre, that it would eventually spiral into one of the most chilling tales of obsession and one of the darkest paths that obsession can lead one down. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. For now, Anatoly is just a boy, standing on the cusp of an abyss he does not yet understand, peering into the depths of mortality and the mysteries it holds. Little did he know, the seeds of the obsession that would consume his life were being sown on that very day under the somber skies of a Russian town mourning the loss of a young soul taken too soon. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the life of Anatoly Moskvin and unravel the mystery of how a moment's encounter with death could weave a dark tapestry that would shock a nation and the world. In the early 1970s, young Anatoly Moskvin's life veered into the uncharted territory of the macabre. Having never before been a witness to the raw, unfiltered expressions of grief that accompany a funeral, Anatoly found himself entranced, his gaze locked on the procession of mourners as they wove through the streets of his Russian hometown. This was not just any procession. It was a river of sorrow, flowing through the cobblestone streets, carrying with it the weight of a life lost too soon, the life of a little girl whose journey had come to an abrupt end. The air was thick with grief, a tangible cloak that draped over everyone in the vicinity, and Anatoly, with the innocence and curiosity of youth, was drawn to it. As the procession inched closer, an unforeseen and unsettling request was thrust upon the young boy. A handful of mourners, their emotions frayed to breaking points, detached from the main body of the procession. Driven by customs or beliefs unfathomable to the uninitiated, they approached Anatoly with a demand that would seem unthinkable to most. They wanted him to kiss the corpse of the girl. This request, jarring and deeply disturbing, would have given many pause, but Anatoly, young and unversed in the ways of the world, found himself complying. Whether it was the intensity of the moment, the authoritative presence of the grieving, or a simple desire not to offend, he did as he was asked. The bewildered boy leaned in and placed a kiss upon the cold, lifeless brow of the girl destined for the grave. This singular act, a momentary crossing of paths between the living and the dead, would imprint itself upon Anatoly's psyche. It was an initiation of sorts, a baptism into a world that straddled the thin veil between life and death, a world that most would shudder to even glance at. Yet, for Anatoly, this encounter would sow the seeds of a dark fixation that would grow in the shadows of his mind, a fascination with the dead that would one day eclipse the bounds of social norms and accepted morality. As we peel back the layers of this chilling tale, we're forced to wonder, how did a moment so fleeting, a request so bizarre, steer the course of Anatoly Moskvin's life toward the darkness that lay ahead? Born into the modest backdrop of Gorky, now known as Nizhny Novgorod in the heart of Russia, Anatoly Yuryevich Moskvin's entrance into the world in September of 1966 was as ordinary as any. His childhood, marked by the simplicity and innocence typical of the time, would have remained unremarkable, seamlessly blending into the tapestry of Soviet life, had it not been for the encounter we've already discussed that would redefine the trajectory of his existence. The moment Anatoly crossed paths with the funeral procession, a pivotal shift occurred. While his peers immersed themselves in the boisterous play of childhood, climbing trees and engaging in sports, Anatoly found solace in the silent company of the dead. The local cemeteries, with their sprawling grounds and solemn atmosphere, became his refuge, his sanctuary away from the living world. Driven by an inexplicable pull toward the scent of freshly turned earth and the quietude that blanketed the graves, Anatoly began a ritual that was as unsettling as it was unique. He would seek out the newly dug graves, their soil still loose and fragrant with the scent of the underworld, and there he would lay himself down to sleep. This wasn't a mere fascination or a passing interest. It was a deep-seated need, a comfort found only in the embrace of the earth that cradled the dead. This practice, startling as it was, became a part of Anatoly's life, persisting into adulthood. The graveyards, with their silent rows of tombstones and the eternal peace they promised, offered him a sense of belonging that he could not find among the living. It was as if, in the stillness of the night, lying atop the burial mounds, Anatoly could commune with the souls that rested beneath, finding in their silent company a kinship that eluded him in the bustling world of those who had not yet crossed the veil. The transformation was gradual but undeniable. Anatoly Moskvin, once just a boy from Gorky, was no longer the same. The cemeteries that dotted the landscape of Nizhny Novgorod, that's what Gorky's name was changed to, had become his home, the realm of the dead, his family, and as he grew, so too did the depths of his obsession, a dark passion that would eventually lead him down a path from which there could be no return. The seeds sown in the heart of a child by a kiss of death had taken root, flourishing in the shadows of Anatoly's soul, preparing to bloom into a chilling legacy that would forever mark his name in the annals of the macabre. Despite all this darkness and hair-raising foreshadowing, Anatoly managed to channel his unusual interests into a realm where they not only found acceptance, but were also revered: academia. Despite the social challenges he faced, a testament to his difficulty in navigating the complex web of human relationships, Anatoly's mind was a beacon of brilliance in the intellectual world. He possessed an insatiable thirst for knowledge, devouring books with a zeal that left his peers in awe. His ability to absorb and retain vast amounts of information was unparalleled, setting him apart as a prodigy in the truest sense. His academic journey culminated in a distinguished graduation from Moscow University, a testament to his intellectual prowess and dedication. But Anatoly's ambitions didn't stop at the confines of traditional academic achievement. He carved out a niche for himself as a renowned linguist, delving into the intricacies of language with the same fervor he applied to every other interest. His career blossomed, marking him as a respected scholar, a sought-after guest lecturer, and a prolific writer. Yet the subjects that captivated him the most, the one to which he dedicated his life's work, were morbidly unique: death, burial rituals, and the occult. Anatoly Moskvin had become a necropolist, an expert in the study of cemeteries and all acts of death culture. His expertise made him an invaluable resource for institutions across Russia and beyond. If you were seeking insights into macabre topics that most would shy away from, Anatoly Moskvin was your man. Standing before rooms filled with eager listeners, Anatoly shared his knowledge, captivating his audiences with lectures that delved into the shadowy realms of death and the practices surrounding it. Yet, despite the accolades and the respect of academics, a dark secret lurked beneath the surface of his professional achievements. Behind the facade of the accomplished scholar, away from the podiums and the adoration, Anatoly Moskvin was living a double life. The very subjects that he spoke about with authority and passion were not just areas of scholarly interest. They were the manifestations of a deep-seated obsession that had taken root in his soul from a young age, the horrors that unfolded behind the scenes, hidden from the view of his admiring audience, would soon come to light, revealing the chilling truth about a man who had become the foremost authority on death and its rituals. The contrast between the public perception of Anatoly Moskvin, the respected linguist, and the reality of his private fixations would shock the nation and transform the world's foremost necropolis from famous to infamous, even notorious. From his earliest days, Anatoly had been the apple of his parents' eye, a cherished only child who was tended to with care and attention that never waned. The cocoon of familial love and support, while nurturing, also allowed Anatoly's more unconventional interests to flourish unchecked. Choosing to stay nestled within the comforts of his parents' home well into adulthood, Anatoly's existence was markedly solitary. Unlike his peers, he ventured neither into the realms of dating nor socializing. His life was a testament to solitude and singular focus. His dedication to a healthy lifestyle, eschewing alcohol and tobacco, stood in stark contrast to his contemporaries, marking him as an individual of discipline and self-restraint, at least in some things. Yet, beneath this facade of health and scholarly dedication lay a passion that veered sharply from the norm. Anatoly was a collector of dolls, but not just any dolls. His collection, verging on the obsessive, was comprised of life-sized figures that he amassed with the zeal of a man possessed. The Moskvin household, periodically left to Anatoly's sole stewardship due to his parents' penchant for travel, became a sanctuary for his growing collection. Each return of the elder Moskvins was marked by the arrival of a new, silent inhabitant, a testament to Anatoly's unrelenting pursuit of his peculiar passion. The dolls, each unique and handcrafted, began to fill the spaces of their home, turning it into a gallery of inanimate companions that bore witness to Anatoly's isolated existence. Despite the eccentricity of their son's hobby, the elder Moskvins viewed Anatoly's doll collection with a mix of indulgence and resignation. Aware of his unconventional nature, they chose to embrace his quirks, rationalizing that his hobby, though unusual, was harmless. In their eyes, Anatoly was the epitome of obedience and tranquility, a son who, despite his idiosyncrasies, had never strayed into the vices or rebellions that often mark youth. Thus, they accepted the ever-expanding collection of dolls as a quirk of their son's character, a small price to pay for the peace and predictability he brought into their lives. Little did they know that the dolls that crowded their home, each meticulously cared for and staged by Anatoly, were not merely the inert tokens of an eccentric hobby. They were the outward signs of a deeper, darker obsession that had taken root in Anatoly's psyche, a manifestation of his lifelong fascination with death and the dead. As the dolls stood in silent vigil, they harbored secrets that, once revealed, would shatter the serene image of Anatoly Moskvin, exposing the macabre reality that lay beneath the surface of his quiet, scholarly life. In 2011, the tranquility of Nizhny Novgorod was shattered by a series of chilling incidents that would eventually lead investigators to a discovery beyond their wildest imaginations, or nightmares. The serene final resting places of the departed had been violated, graves desecrated, and bodies mysteriously vanished, setting off a wave of horror and disbelief throughout the community. The focus of these macabre activities was particularly specific, targeting the burial sites of young girls, an unsettling detail that only added to the growing unease among the townsfolk and authorities alike. As law enforcement delved into the mystery, dedicating weeks to the surveillance of cemeteries and the interrogation of potential suspects, Their investigation culminated in a visit to the home of Anatoly Moskvin. What awaited them within those walls would forever imprint itself into the histories of crime and horror. The Moskvin residence, once a quiet home filled with the silent presence of countless dolls, revealed its ghastly secrets to the unsuspecting officers. The scene that had unfolded before their eyes was one of unparalleled horror. The dolls, each occupying a place of honor on chairs and sofas throughout the home, were not mere inanimate objects of a collector's fancy. Instead, they were the mummified remains of human corpses, disguised and positioned as if they were still part of the living world. The investigative team, seasoned in the ways of crime and punishment, found themselves facing a reality that defied comprehension. Each doll, with its dull eyes and expressionless face, bore the unmistakable mark of death, their true nature hidden beneath layers of clothing and paint. These were not the creations of an eccentric artist or the products of a disturbed imagination, or rather, they were not just that. They were the remains of young girls taken from their graves, their eternal rest interrupted by a man whose obsession with death had crossed into the realm of the unthinkable. Anatoly Moskvin, the respected linguist and academic, the necropolist who had spent his life studying and lecturing on the customs of burial and the culture of death, had transformed his home into a macabre gallery of the deceased. The dolls that his parents believed to be harmless tokens of their son's eccentricity were, in fact, a testament to his spiritual corruption. The discovery at the Moskvin residence not only solved the mystery of the desecrated graves, but also unveiled the dual life of a man who had managed to conceal his compulsions beneath the guise of scholarly pursuit. The fallout from this revelation would ripple through the community and the academic world, leaving many to question how the warning signs of Moskvin's descent into madness had been overlooked for so long. As the case unfolded, it served as a stark reminder of the fine line between genius and madness, and the dark secrets that can lurk behind the facade of a seemingly ordinary, or nearly ordinary, life. In the wake of the shocking discovery within the Moskvin household, Anatoly Moskvin's demeanor remained eerily calm and detached, a stark contrast to the horror that his actions had unveiled. Unaware, or perhaps unconcerned about the gravity of his situation, Anatoly exhibited a level of cooperation with the authorities that bordered on eagerness. To him, the dolls were not a collection of profane trophies, but a source of pride, a manifestation of his life's work and passion. His willingness to share and explain his creations stemmed from a genuine sense of achievement. After all, he had dedicated countless hours to their transformation from mere mortal remains, his view, not mine, to companions in his solitary existence. The extensive search of his home revealed a trove of materials that shed light on the depth of Anatoly's fixation with death and the afterlife. Books on doll making, a seemingly innocent hobby, were found alongside more incriminating evidence. Photographs of open graves and the lifeless bodies they contained, nameplates pilfered from headstones meant to serve as blasphemous mementos of his nocturnal excursions. These discoveries painted a picture of a man whose interests had spiraled into an all-consuming obsession. Eventually, authorities pieced together the true scale of Anatoly's desecrations, tracing his activities across the vast expanse from Nizhny Novgorod to Moscow, a distance of 428 kilometers or 265 miles, to say nothing of the massive square mileage that Anatoly must have covered on his conquest of cadavers. Authorities uncovered a trail of over 100 disturbed graves, and within the confines of what was once a family home, 26 human dolls stood as mute testimony to Anatoly's grim endeavors. These silent figures, meticulously crafted from the stolen corpses of young girls, were the culmination of his quest to fill a void that conventional human relationships could not. I shudder and refuse to speculate on just how complete Anatoly's relationship with the dolls may have been. When confronted with the question of why he had committed such unthinkable acts, Anatoly's explanation revealed the twisted logic that guided his actions. His yearning for companionship, specifically for a child of his own, had driven him to extreme measures. Lacking the social connections that might lead to marriage and family, he turned to the only place where he felt at home, the cemetery. There, among the graves of the departed, he sought to create a family that he could never have through natural means. In his mind, his actions were not theft or desecration, but acts of creation born from a desire for love and companionship. When one pauses to consider the entire picture, Anatoly Moskvin is very nearly a tragic figure. But examining that same entire picture just as clearly reveals that he is absolutely a monster. Anatoly's methodical approach to realizing his necrovision was a blend of delusion and meticulous planning. His quest to create a family of his own, and I question just how innocent and forthright he was with his own characterizations of exactly what his purpose was, but we'll leave that for now. His quest to create a family of his own through means that defy moral and ethical boundaries was underpinned by a ritualistic process that he undertook with unsettling precision, sort of like a serial killer. His strategy involved an initial scouting phase where the obituaries served as a grotesque catalog from which he would select his next child. This is rough. The newspapers, innocent in their intent to inform, became for Anatoly a gateway to potential companions. Each announcement of a child's passing, a beacon that drew him closer to his next act of defilement. What sets Anatoly's actions apart from mere grave robbing is the deeply ritualistic manner in which he sought consent from his intended victims, or at least what he considered consent. In his distorted perception, the silence of the grave was not an immutable barrier between the living and the dead, but a medium through which he could seek permission for his deeds. This belief led him to the graveside of each girl, where he would pose his question to the deceased, lingering in the eerie stillness of the cemetery for a sign. According to his own testimony, only an imagined assent, a whisper from the beyond, would compel him to proceed. This aspect of his ritual underscores the depth of his delusion. I'm not a psychiatrist, but sounds a lot like paranoid schizophrenia to me. He's blurring the lines between reality and the supernatural in his mind. This need for the victim's assent before embarking upon a heinous crime puts me in mind of the horrific serial killer Richard Trenton Chase, known as the Vampire of Sacramento, who would pick his victims more or less at random, but he would walk up to a house, and if the doors were locked, he would take that as a sign he was unwelcome and he would leave. But if the door was unlocked, he would see that as an invitation to enter and to murder and do other awful, awful things. So he too was waiting for an imagined permission. Also, please, always, no matter where you live, no matter how remote, always lock your doors at night. There's no need to give the monsters any permission. Once Moskvin had received permission from his victim, the process of exhumation and preservation that followed was carried out with a meticulous attention to detail. Anatoly employed a rudimentary yet effective method of mummification, using a mixture of baking soda and salt to desiccate the bodies. This step was crucial not only in preserving the physical form of his dolls, but also in facilitating their transformation from human remains to inanimate companions. The secrecy with which he managed this phase of the process, hiding the bodies within the cemetery to evade detection, speaks to the calculated nature of his actions, a stark contrast to the fantastical elements of his ritual. Once he deemed the mummification was complete, Anatoly would transport the remains to his home, where the final transformation took place. Here, in the seclusion of his room, the bodies of the young girls were dressed and modified to resemble dolls, completing their transition from victims of a tragic fate to silent members of Anatoly's grotesque family. This final act of transformation was, for Anatoly, the culmination of his efforts, a way to fulfill his longing for companionship through the only means he felt were available to him. In the solitude of his garage, transformed into a stomach-churning workshop of child corpse dolls, Anatoly Moskvin undertook the grim task of crafting his collection with a detail and devotion that belied the depravity of his actions. Each step in the process of creating these dolls from the remains of deceased young girls was executed with a precision and, horribly, an acumen that spoke of deeply rooted obsession. The use of padding to fill out the body cavities and limbs was a methodical attempt to preserve the human form, an effort to maintain the semblance of life in bodies that had already been claimed by death. The application of clothing, makeup, and wigs served not only to disguise the true nature of his creations, but also to imbue them with a disturbing mimicry of the living. His decision to cover damaged or decayed faces with masks reveals the lengths to which Anatoly was willing to go to maintain the illusion of life and beauty in his grotesque facsimiles of children. These actions, driven by a profound disconnect from the reality of death and decay, and conversely the beauty and innocence of a child's life, underscores the depth of Anatoly's delusion and his refusal to acknowledge the finality of death. And I'm not really sure that characterization is fair to the rest of us. Many people believe that death is not the end. Thankfully, almost no one winds up like Anatoly Moskvin. More troubling to me is his refusal to acknowledge the emotional life of other humans or to consider the impact that his actions would have on grieving parents. Even setting aside the questions of morality, desecration, sanctity, none of which should be set aside, by the way, but even if we do set those aside, Anatoly's inability to conceive of the obvious emotional fallout of his actions for anyone connected to these poor young girls makes him read as little more than a run-of-the-mill sociopath, no matter how much self-regard his knowledge or intellect may grant. Moskvin actually believed that he could eventually reanimate the dead girls, which speaks to yet a further layer of his obsession rooted in a misguided understanding of the occult and a profound desire to overturn the natural order. So he was an aspiring necromancer. His insistence that the preservation techniques were merely preparatory measures intended to keep the body viable for future resurrection reveals a mind that had become untethered from the ethical and moral considerations that govern society. And his belief in the possibility of reanimation, of restoring life to the lifeless, highlights the truly tragic extent of his detachment from reality. Furthermore, his self-justification of his actions through the claimed consent of the deceased underscores a disturbing rationalization process. Anatoly's conviction that he was not committing immoral acts, based on the belief that he had received permission from the girls themselves, girls, by the way, that were too young to give permission to an adult to do anything with their bodies, even if they were alive, illustrates a profound misunderstanding of consent and a refusal to confront the implications of his actions. His narrative, one in which he positions himself as a caretaker or even a savior of these girls, stands in stark contrast to the violation represented by his theft of their remains and the subsequent desecration of their memory. Anatoly Moskvin, facing charges for desecrating the dead, was initially at risk of receiving only a 5-year prison sentence. However, it quickly became apparent to those involved in his case that such a sentence would be insufficient, not necessarily due to the length of time, yes, in part due to the length of time if you're asking me, but because prison wouldn't address the core issue, Anatoly's lack of remorse and understanding that his actions were wrong. This fundamental lack of repentance signaled a deep-seated issue that went beyond what conventional punishment could rectify. The concern was not just for the crimes he had already committed, but also for the potential continuation of these actions in the future, given his unrepentant stance and failure to recognize the immorality of his behavior. Recognizing the inadequacy of a prison sentence to rehabilitate or alter Anatoly's behavior, and driven by fears of what he might do if left unchecked, authorities opted for an alternative approach. After a diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia by a court-appointed specialist, the decision was made to commit Anatoly to a psychiatric facility. This move aimed to provide him with the specialized care and supervision needed to address both his mental health issues and the underlying factors contributing to his criminal actions. As of December 2023, just a couple months ago, Anatoly Moskvin remains in the custody of mental health professionals, and his journey through the psychiatric care system continues without a definitive end in sight. Despite the grave nature of his past actions, Anatoly has managed to forge a personal relationship. He has a girlfriend, and harbors plans for a future together outside the confines of institutional care, contingent on a professional assessment of his readiness to rejoin society. However, Anatoly's path to potential release is marred by his own actions and attitudes. In moments critical for demonstrating personal growth or remorse, he has faltered, effectively undermining his chances for early release. His reluctance to apologize to the families of the victims, girls whose remains he desecrated, highlights a persistent lack of empathy and understanding of the pain caused by his actions. Anatoly's rationale that the deceased once buried sever all ties to their living relatives and are thus fair game shows a deeply flawed moral reasoning and a failure to grasp the sanctity of human life and the grieving process of those left behind. Anatoly categorically refuses to recognize the deeply troubling nature of his actions. His persistent desire to create, quote, living, unquote, children from the remains of the deceased demonstrates a stark detachment from societal norms and ethical boundaries. His reluctance to disavow future endeavors in his grotesque craft, and his unwillingness to categorically reject the possibility of returning to such activities signals a concerning lack of insight into the severity and impact of his past behavior. This stance not only hampers his progress in the eyes of the mental health professionals responsible for his care, but also raises alarms about the potential risk he poses should he ever be deemed fit for release. Anatoly's conviction that life and death are interchangeable concepts that he can manipulate at will reveals a profound ideological rift between him and the foundational values of respect for the deceased and empathy for the grieving. Sadly, this next part may not actually be his fault, but from an early age, Anatoly's conflation of life with death has guided his actions, leading to a life marked by transgressions against both the living and the dead. In Anatoly's worldview, the distinction between the two states is not just blurred but non-existent, a perspective that leaves little room for the reconciliation of compromise necessary for his acceptance of the moral implications of his actions. It seems that Anatoly Moskvin's sense of self, his identity, his very purpose is inexorably tied to his horrible creations, and that asking him to stop his awful art would be the same as telling him to stop being who he is, which is of course not possible. Until Moskvin can demonstrate that he is a morally tethered human being and not just some heinous Geppetto obsessed with building cadaver dolls, life outside a mental institution should be absolutely out of the question. Hey guys, before I let you go, I wanted to let you know that I have decided that going forward, I'm just going to release one episode a week on Thursdays. I'm planning to try to make them a little longer than they have been and to avoid, except for very occasionally, multi-parters. So again, no more Sunday episodes. They'll be coming out at 5 p.m. on Thursdays, once a week. They'll be a little longer, and I'm really going to work at making sure that they are complete stories. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate each and every one of you. I'm Zevon Odelberg, and this has been Kinda Murdery.
If you like the show, please subscribe, review, and tell your friends. You can find us on social media at Kinda Murdery or email at kindamurdery@gmail.com.